Today we're going over a trip report. The trip report is titled Challenging Reality, LSD and Cannabis by Turtle. Dosage 500 UG of LSD and 3 hits smoked of cannabis. Body weight 148 pounds. This is my experience with around 500 to 750 micrograms of acid mixed with about a half bowl of weed. I've taken shrooms several times before, and I've just recently stopped smoking weed constantly. I've found that I have somewhat of a natural tolerance to LSD, so that 100 to 200 micrograms only provided me with light visuals and more active internal monologue. I had taken this dosage before and also mixed the substance with weed. Although when I smoked the weed, the acid was well on its way to coming down. During that trip, the experience was so visually pleasing but intense nonetheless. Ultimately, I had thought it was one of the most interesting and thought-provoking experiences of my life, something that I would love to try again. For some context, 6 days prior to the trip, my girlfriend and I split. It was mostly mutual, but my feelings were still sensitive. I also regularly feel depressed when I'm alone by myself, and I had the house to myself for a whole weekend, of course. I also felt extra alone due to the breakup. I decided to smoke weed to intensify the trip, in hopes to achieve the same effect I got last time. I went outside and smoked next to the sunroom at the back of my house. After I took 3 or 4 hits, I started getting the familiar feeling of my trip starting to intensify. I decided that I should be in a really safe place for this ride. Realizing this will most likely be more intense than the previous trip. Eager for the insane trip, I decided to go back in the house, only to realize I've locked myself out. From here on out, my experience becomes near impossible to describe with words. I remember thinking, oh fuck, because my mother and her boyfriend were in New York City and I was hundreds of miles away with no key. Naturally, I started overthinking how I'm going to get back inside. I tried all entrances, but unfortunately they were all securely locked. I quickly start losing my short-term memory. I start revisiting the same entrances, trying to open the same doors, just to realize I've done this before. Because of this, I start panicking, worrying that I'm insane. I'm going insane. After several minutes of repeating this, I sit down on a piece of concrete next to the sunroom. I could no longer talk, as all I could say was, "What? Who?" softly to myself, so calling my mom to let me in was off the table. I realized that I would have to sit there all afternoon and endure this. The trip felt as if its intensity was exponentially increasing every second. What was once my backyard morphed into an unrecognizable alien area of what I could only describe as imperfect perfection. Everything was vibrant and alluring as usual, but I couldn't focus on that because I could feel all my memories and all that I am as a person starting to fade into nothingness. I had no idea what was going on, and this unknowing created a deep and painful pit of dread and fear in my stomach. Soon after this, I started getting auditory hallucinations. Now, this was absolutely torture. I noticed that every sound I heard, whether it be the grass swaying or the saliva in my mouth, started to repeat a few times. And the second I realized that the repetition of these noises became infinite. So, for example, I would breathe and the sound of my breath would echo into infinity, driving me to the absolute brink of insanity. The only thing I remember was everything going white. Sometime later, I remember feeling as if my body didn't exist, only my head, and that I could feel this source of my consciousness was in the center of my head, right between my ears. At some point, I visualized a 2D grid that perfectly aligned with my source of consciousness, creating a horizon following every movement of my eye. I remember my thoughts exponentially getting louder and louder, questioning questions until I questioned the very idea of questioning, and every questioning and who I am. The train of thought and the alignment of the grid was with my center of conscious was extremely disturbing and uncomfortable to me. After what felt like an immeasurable amount of time, I regained the ability to stand, so I tried walking, but my brain's understanding of gravity and balance was completely thrown off. Something that no animal on Earth is supposed to experience. This imbalance triggered a sense that I could describe as not feeling comfortable in space. When I walked, it felt as if I was walking on a 1 meter diameter sphere. With the gravity of Earth, every step was scary because my senses were extremely confused with my place in space. My brain couldn't understand anything at all. I felt so out of place in existence. After I'd come down enough to string sentences together, I finally called my mom, telling her that I was locked out. She then quickly called a family friend with a copy of the house key to drive over and let me in. I felt no relief after the call. I was waiting desperately for them to come, and when they did, I walked to the front of the house and I gained a moment of brief bliss and sanity as everything looked black and white, accompanied by after images of every object in blue, yellow, and red. I spent the rest of the night in the house alone, feeling like I'll never be the same person as I used to be before the trip. I felt like I lost something. Perhaps it was the blissful ignorance of what the human mind can do. After the experience, I often found myself in fear of nature for some reason. I still frequently question nature and reality and how our powerful yet limited brain perceives the world. For about a week after the experience, I felt extremely anxious when I thought about the trip. But the trip was all I could think about. This was by far the absolute worst experience of my life. I felt very isolated. This experience has shown me the dark side of LSD, but also a great potential that I wish to seek. But alas, I've been so incredibly frightened by the experience that I need time to recover and a break from psychedelics. Experience year 2023. Gender male. Age at the time of experience 18. This document was published April 24th, 2025.